Good evening, family. You've tuned in again to the Journey 2020, and we're pleased that you feel that this is not a waste of your time on a Friday night to tune in to us. We're here tonight with two wonderful guests. One of our guests you know from previous broadcasts, and that's Reverend Gail Gardner. And we also have a guest who is not a guest, someone who I've had association with over the last probably year and a half or so, and that is Dee Dee Eshelman, who reminded me, although she is an expert in what she does, that she wanted to make sure that I let you know that she is not a doctor. But as you listen to her, you're going to find that there is a lot of in-depth information and knowledge that she shares with you. Before we start, though, to introduce myself, I'm Dr. John Robertson. I'm a clinical psychologist, and my co-host is here, or I should say, I'm here with my co-host, Charles Morris, and Charles in his matchless. Now, Charles, wasn't that a good word that I started out with this time?
Yes. I wasn't expecting that one, but first I want to say welcome back.
Okay.
And we missed you the past 2 weeks.
Okay.
And you're going to have to briefly tell us about your vacation because you were in the Bahamas, correct? Or was it?
It was Bahamas.
Right.
Yeah,
so you just show up and you just start talking, and then you don't say anything about your cruise or your trip. So what's up with that? Come on. I mean, you got to enlighten us a little bit, because you've been off for the past 2 weeks. I was flying solo, but I was able to do it, but I'm not Dr. Robinson.
Okay.
So you got to tell us about your trip real quick.
Now, I'm going to say, does that sound like a little envy going on there?
Just a little.
Okay.
So you picked up on that. Wait a minute. I'm not going to deny it. You was in the Bahamas on cruising, and you left me here. And you were about to, So I need to, enlighten us, So
family, before we go forward, I want to tell you, our broadcast tonight is about mental health. Okay. One of the things that I can say, it was my mental health that took me to the Bahamas, and I want to have to deal with a little mental health with Charles tonight for my going to the Bahamas.
Well, see, that's a good thing because at least you recognize, which means that you on your game.
Okay.
So I'm not gonna, deny it. Wait a minute, if I got a chance to hang out here, go to the Bahamas.
Okay, I'm just gonna say thank you, sir.
Oh, right. No, seriously. Actually, that was my way of asking how was your trip and what you share your trip with us. That's what that was.
Okay. Sometimes, what did Freud said? Sometimes a cigar is a cigar. Okay. At any rate, the trip was great. We left West Palm Beach, took what is actually the Island Ferry, which is a small cruise ship over to Grand Bahama, which some of our audience may know, but some not. That Grand Bahama is only 55 miles from straight east from West Palm. Okay. We arrived in Grand Bahama the Saturday morning and started vacationing seriously since then. And my main thing was to get to the beach, to get to some water, and to some, as my island friends would say, to some good seawater. And I spent the next 5 days just absorbing as much vitamin D as I could. So with that, Charles, oh, by the way, unfortunately, I did not get to go fishing over there this time.
And you didn't bring a brother's shirt, so okay.
Okay. I do have something for you that I'll give you after the broadcast. Okay.
All right.
So, but on to the business of the show tonight. Our two guests are here to cap off May as Mental Health Month. And we've had some discussions, we being individuals in my office, about the importance of mental health, some of what is going on in the mental health arena today. And our two guests can talk about this a bit more. I'm going to ask them first, though, to just describe a little bit of who they are, what their agencies are about, and we'll just dive in after that. So if I'll ask perhaps our guest, Dee Dee, just go ahead, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. My name is Dee Dee Eshelman is my nickname, but actually I was named Dale by my parents. I'm the youngest of 6 children.
Okay.
And so because of that, I guess they'd run out of all of the good girl names. I have a sister Mary and a sister Sarah. So instead of naming me Catherine after my mother, that would have been logical, they named me Dale after my mother's brother. And decided they would call me Dee Dee if I was a girl. And so, lo and behold, I was a girl. And growing up in a large family has had a huge impact on who I am. Being the youngest of 6, I was telling Charles earlier that I grew up knowing at a very early age that when I was 18 years old, I either needed to be in college or moving out in my own apartment or paying rent. So that sense of independence was fostered in my family of origin.
I can understand with a family of 6 how that would be well fostered.
Right. I work with a wonderful group of colleagues at an agency called Everyone's Counseling Center.
I love that name.
Yeah.
Okay.
We are on Robinson Street in downtown Orlando, and we offer individual, couples, and family counseling, and some groups as well.
Okay, great. And from what I understand about the agency, that it's a new agency.
It is. We just opened on May 1st, but the therapists, like myself, I've been a therapist now for 19 years.
Okay.
And I'm the newbie.
Okay. Wow.
So all of our therapists are, have between 17 and 35 years experience as counselors.
Wow.
So
that's a well-grounded set of colleagues that you have.
Right.
With the Dee Dee, back to you and the work that you do. I had earlier before the broadcast had thought of you primarily working with youngsters, with young children, but you disabused me of that notion. And just tell us a little bit of who you work with and what kind of work you do.
As a teenager myself, with that great family background that I had, I experienced even then a lot of issues with self-esteem and a sense of who I was, and lack of confidence in who I was. And so while I was getting my undergraduate degree at the ripe old age of 20, I decided that I wanted to become a youth minister. And so I worked as a professional youth minister in the Episcopal Church for 11 years. And it was during that time that I decided that I wanted to continue working my work after doing youth ministry as a therapist. And so initially I started out working with teenagers and their families, and then very quickly started working with young children, ages 3 and up, and their families. And my training is as a marriage and family therapist, so I started doing couples work and adult individual work as well.
Okay. So from the youth ministry, it sounds like it was just another ministry, with call therapy.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Definitely just another, to me it's all a continuation of the same call on my life to minister to other people.
Okay, very good. And Reverend Gail, as we've had you on before, but I'd like you to talk about, we've had talked about so many things, but we've never had a chance to really talk a bit about Rapha Soul Care.
Okay, and I'm thinking, let me say this, I've known Dee Dee, and I walked into her, I was a I, knowing that I needed counseling was back in 1990. And she was not there. As I recall, I had someone else.
Right.
But I walked into that office some years later because I had gone for pastoral counseling through Liberty University.
Okay.
And thinking I was needing an internship. But I come to find I didn't need one because
That's right.
I wasn't doing clinical. But I didn't know, So anyway, so we met before. And I have her, and I don't know if it's still there. I think it may not because I have a new phone now. But I had your name and number in my phone for years.
Right, for years.
Wow.
And you sent me email messages when you opened up Rafa.
That's right, that's right. So we go back a little bit.
All right.
We got
bit.
history.
There you go.
At
Yeah,
least
all
10
right.
years.
All right.
Yeah,
All
at
right.
least 10 years.
That's it.
But Rafa Soul Care and Empowerment Institute is a component of Woman to Woman Global Mentorship Network. That's our nonprofit organization. And the Rafa Soul Care is the counseling portion that where we work at a grassroots level, counseling, giving people another alternative. And the reason why we came up with another alternative, pastoral counseling is master's. I had to earn a master's degree. I had already retired as an educator and had a master's degree, and I had to say, darn, I got to go back and get another master's degree, I could be using this time trying to get a doctorate, But I had such a passion for people because I had been a survivor of sexual abuse, childhood sexual abuse, CSA, of domestic violence, and of rape. So I felt like I was qualified, if nothing else, to experience. And I had started the counseling session. And as I went on, I really began to say, that's what's happening. There's so much of this in the African American community. We don't know it because what goes on in our house stays in our house. So with that lie, being something that we grew up with, and like it don't stay anywhere else and you're not hurting anybody but yourself kind of mentality, which is not true.
Exactly.
So we established Rafa Soul Care and Empowerment Institute where we can give people in the church, begin to build a relationship with them. First of all, that we are as a race are very mistrustful of other races and from the history. So
with some justification, by the way.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother
right,
session.
exactly.
So with that in mind, we were into the multicultural era, but I always felt that nobody understands me like somebody looks like me. You see, so I said, I wonder how many more people, and how can I test the hypothesis? What is that really about?
Right.
And the more I began to think about it, and I talked to someone about anything, I tell them what I do and whatever, and they'll come up in the conversation. That happened to me too. And then I talk to them. That happened to me too. And I said, well, how many of us are out here? And we find that in that church community, that there are people of color, whether Hispanic, African American, East Indian, whatever. There's a lot of that type of things that comes to hinder us from growing, and that trauma that affected our lives. So I thought to myself, I said, well, I think I would do better. Now, the one thing I do is not do or perform clinical therapy. Those things. I don't know how. I know some things, but I don't have a license for that. So, and I don't want to mess anybody up, So I will refer people on, but I try to find someone that they can relate to, especially if they look like them. I volunteer for organizations, and one thing is I found that I can't get anyone to come on our side of town, but they want you to sit on that side of town, and that means that they are able to add those numbers to their reports, their yearly, annual reports every year, and that's more money they get. But you know,
just to make it plain, as you know, we do on the journey.
Yeah.
When you were talking about on our side of town versus their side of town,
Yeah.
you're talking about predominantly a black part of town versus predominantly white part of town.
Yes, and predominantly not just where there's these where the agencies are is basically in on that side of town. We say we're crossing the railroad tracks, but our culture of being distrustful, being with the myths that that have been a part of the culture, is just don't feel that trust. When I can get them, you're still there. So when I can get them in my office, I build that relationship and we talk. I get someone who wants, bereavement counseling, and in the middle of the counseling session, out of nowhere, comes, I was sexually abused, or on their intake sheet, they check that box, So we go into that conversation too, because sometimes it can be that. But in any case, I try to build a relationship, and if I have to refer someone, if I feel like, this is a little deeper than I can handle as far as depression or anything else, I might see acute depression. I might see some things that are not normal, and then even if I do an assessment that goes to my level, then I refer them on. If they want to go on, sometimes they don't want to go on. They get some built, and I say, well, I only got 5 or 6 sessions with me on this particular thing, you have to kind of pry people because they're so glad to have somebody pry their fingers loose. Wait a minute,
Right.
But the whole idea is to get them dependent. Now they can go into what we call the in-gathering support group, which is twofold. They go into a support group mode, or we teach organizations how to set up support groups like in their churches or whatever.
So Rafa has a support group or some support groups for those individuals who want to do, a self-care kind of a
That's right.
group.
If I send someone to you or to Dee Dee or to someone, they still have me as a support one-on-one. But if there's something that's going, like I use scripture, because most of my people are from the church.
Right.
If they're not, I let them know what I do, where I stand, and if they want to continue on with me. If not, then I can refer you to someone else. And sometimes people feel that they're ready to do that. Even if they haven't been in the church in a number of years, they say, well, but I grew up in the church and my grandmother went. So I said, well, okay, then let's see if we can take you through this. And I'm going to always point you back to scripture, but I also know that this is an issue, and somewhere we can show you. My book, Woman to Woman, Gleaning Inspirational Insights from Biblical Mothers, talks about that, how even back then there were domestic violence and sexual abuse and all those things were a part. And so it's nothing new.
Right.
So I try to get them in tune with that, let them know they're not strange. And I of course, disclosure is the beginning of healing. And so you can get them to talk.
It's shining the light.
Shining
the light on it.
And getting them to think that, this is really not my fault. No, it's not. Exactly. So that's what we do there. We handle those things. Now with Woman to Woman Global Mentorship Network, which is the parent of Rafa Soul Care, we approach it from an advocacy and social justice issue on different topics.
One of the things I wanted to just emphasize, the point that you had made, actually 2 points that you had made, and that is the sense that as you're ministering to these individuals, that you're clear that ministry is not therapy as such.
That's right. They make and there's a document on the back of their intake sheet that talks about confidentiality, and if at any time I feel that maybe I need to recommend to them a professional counselor, that I may do so, and they have the reason, they have the option of taking that suggestion or not. But I only see my clients supposed to be 5 sessions at the most. Sometimes we run to 6, but usually that's because they've skipped a couple of weeks, and we don't get to the other weeks. And by this time I realized that maybe you're all right, and we can move you on out all together. You can skip 2 or 3 weeks sometimes, you know.
One of the other things that you said is that sense of mistrust.
Yes.
And I know at times in the African American community, there's a sense of one holding things, within, what's in the house stays in the house.
In the house.
But also, in your work, one of the things I think it's important that you're doing is making that link between the
bridge,
pastoral care,
it.
right? The bridge.
Yes,
that's a wonderful way of describing it.
We call it closing the gap, and being the bridge.
Okay.
You know.
And connecting them to counseling or therapy.
Yes.
Now, in that, I think that you're one of the few people in the faith community, at least that I'm aware of, that's doing that.
Yes.
One of the things that I'd want to ask you, and again, since you know Dee Dee, how would you go about making that connection? Let's say that example of you to Dee Dee with those folks that have, kind of hung on.
Hung on me, I would, how would I say it to them?
How would you do it?
If I have someone who, I'm thinking of someone right now that I really believe that if I take them another step and do an assessment on them, and if they're still at the point where I was with depression, I know they're grieving. I don't know how deep that grief is. I made some suggestions. I can't get them to journal, so I try to do some other things with them so that they can talk about that when they come. I can't get them back in the office, and so my thing is, if I can say to them, I would like for you to see someone that I believe can do a thorough assessment. And if they are, and that's nothing we do, if they don't have the funds, we try to find out who can we connect them to. And one thing about people of color, I'll take that $50, this is what they're thinking, to win Dixie first. Because I do not see the need.
Don't see the need and the value.
I've been all right all this time, and God has helped me, and I'm not going, and it's okay, But if I can get them to say to them, this is what I want you to do. I want you to speak to someone, and then I would call the other person, you or and I've done that. I really would like you to talk to this person. Now, doctor knows what I'm looking for, but I want them to get someone who they can relate to. It may not be possible or feasible. I didn't have someone who looked like me. I had Sarah.
You had Sarah.
You see, but she said something to me. She said, "You're such an elegant lady," and I had never heard anybody say that to me before. And it changed my whole outlook. That one thing she said to me. So I don't ever want to send someone. But if they're going to hold their, say, well, I don't want to. And I would say, well, who would you prefer? Would it be okay? And this is the person. I think they might be good.
Right.
You do not have to stay with them.
Right. You have to test them out.
Let's try this and see what I need them to let me know what they think.
Right.
And I think they can take you to that place where they can give me an assessment, an evaluation of where you are.
Right.
So I know if I need to go on with you, or if they need to see you, or we need to refer you to another licensed professional.
Right. One of the things, and thank you for sharing that first connection to your own therapist, and someone who acknowledged you.
Yes.
In that. And Dee Dee, I know that in your work that you probably have encountered individuals, who probably look and say, well, what is this white woman going to do for me? Okay.
Yes, I think that acknowledgement is key.
Yes.
I believe that you have to acknowledge the people that are in front of you, no matter who they are. They're human beings. They have the right to be there. I have to see any person that comes across my path, whether it's in my office, on the street, at my daughter's elementary school. I have to acknowledge their presence in my life, in that space, for that moment of time. if you don't acknowledge the other drivers on the road, you're going to have an accident. Something's going to happen.
Right.
You have to acknowledge people.
Okay.
That's very much a part of who I am.
Okay.
And so a client or a potential client comes to me, I have to acknowledge who they are. Okay. Usually what I tell clients in that first session is, I've known you all of 10 minutes, or I've known you all of 30 minutes. If, this has to be a partnership, this has to be a collaboration. We have to work together. I have 19 years experience working with other families, but I don't have any experience working with your family.
Okay.
You have to help me. I don't know diddly squat about your family. I know a little bit about yours, but only because we've spoken before.
Right.
And so I have to acknowledge your expertise, as well as what my expertise is. I encourage clients, just like you do, to take the things that they learn in session and to, try it, give it a fair shake at home. And if it doesn't fly, then come back and tell me.
Okay.
Especially family interventions, because the family interventions are always so unique. I'm taking knowledge that I have from things that I've read, from staffing cases with other therapists, from things that I've gathered in various different sources, and even youth ministry resources, and I'm trying to put it so that it works for that family's need. And they don't always work. Or they don't always work the way that I thought that it would.
Work. Exactly. Yeah.
And so I have to be flexible.
Okay.
And I think that, what I'm talking about for me is true of all of the therapists that I've worked with, both clinically at Everyone's Counseling Center, as well as the therapists that were in my cohort when I went to school, the therapists that I staff cases with regularly now. They all work that way. And so you have to, as a potential client, you have to establish that sense of connection with the therapist. And if you don't, find a different therapist.
Okay. That's important.
It doesn't hurt my feelings if a client doesn't connect with me.
Right.
I tell many of my clients that I will not see them, or I would not have continued to meet with them if I didn't have that sense of connection with them myself. And that's because I don't believe it's ethical to work with someone that I don't respect. I have to have that ability to acknowledge them and that ability to respect them in order to work with them.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. I had an interesting experience last night, as a matter of fact, and there was a client that was referred to me, and this person was one of the I want to call it slipperiest clients, because there were about 3 different appointments that were set up, and somehow something happened at each time that the person didn't quite show. So finally last night, and it really was last night around about 7:30, the person showed up, and after we started talking and I made my usual introduction, and, how may I help you, etc. And I got this very negative reaction, and my first reaction was, I'm here at 7, not verbally, but I was in my mind, I'm here at 7:30 at night waiting on your whatever, and you're going to give me attitude. Okay. Yeah. Well, to make a long story short, it turned out that this person had been disrespected, or he felt disrespected by the person who referred him. And so part of what he was doing was to see whether he was going to get that respect from me. And we began to work when I said to him, I really do feel that you can use the help, but I'm not going to offer it unless you feel comfortable enough to receive it.
Yes.
And he did one of these.
He did a 180.
Okay.
Not what I was expecting.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And by the time we ended the session, we were doing fist bumps, you know,
Oh, my.
and you know, and little brother class, etc. And just a turnaround. The thing that he had said to me at one point is that he simply had felt disrespected. One of the things too in setting up some boundaries, and I said, as I respect you, I expect you will respect me.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that also kind of opened eyes. Okay. So, Dee Dee, some of the things that you've said really triggered some things for me, and that is that sense of acknowledgement. And within the acknowledgement, one of the things that you didn't see, but I don't want to read into what you're saying, but the sense of seeing that client also, you know, was something, because you really can't acknowledge somebody unless you really see them. And there is a line from, was it the movie Avatar, that you all may remember if you've seen the movie, where one of the characters says, I see you. Okay.
Yes.
And that's more than
and
just
it
visual.
responded that I see you also. And I think that in that sense of creating, you know, the big word we like to use in therapy is rapport.
Right.
Creating that sense of connection, that sense of seeing each other as human beings, you know, as individuals with compassion, as someone both ready, and then the other part, and we'll talk about it a little bit further in broadcast, and also able,
Right.
you know, to help,
Right.
are some critical pieces.
Right.
So I just did when you were talking about trying to see whether someone can work with you or not, it really triggered for me that recent experience.
Right. Right. And,
And
understandably so.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
One of the things coming back to, you know, where we had started in terms of, as Reverend, you were saying, that sometimes people can feel that, well, I'll spend the money on that $50 on something else other than therapy or counseling, etc. One of the things that I think is important is the sense of what therapy can do, or what therapy can help in that individual's life. Now, you've talked about the book that you read. And in fact, you're on a second book, if my memory serves me right. Oh, okay.
Still working on it.
Yeah.
Oh,
But I
Tell you
okay.
this book.
I
Okay.
think it's because I'm living it.
Okay.
It's kind of.
It's hard to write when you're living
when
it.
You're living it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you would just talk for a little bit about what you feel, you know, has motivated you, who could have remained, if I call it closeted, to both self-disclose, and not only then to self-disclose, but to try to pass that information or knowledge on to others through your books. What kind of motivated you to do that?
And, you know, and in my book, I hide behind the fact that I want to tell my story. So I used everybody else's story.
Okay.
That's what happened. I actually used the other story of other women, and the last chapter of each story, there's a fictitious letter from that woman to the reader, talking to them personally. So it was my way of writing my bio without being uncovered. But it was a discourse in a sense, because someone had told me, I volunteer for the Victim Service Center, Central Florida, and in their speakers bureau, and one of the administrators said to me, said, "When are you going to write your bio?" And I said, I never thought about that. I said, first of all, nobody buys a bio unless it's somebody famous. I said, you know, and everybody thinks that they all got a good story, so it would wind up not going anywhere. And he said, well,
I would disagree, by the way.
Okay.
But at any rate, I'm going to leave that alone.
Okay. Well,
I can encourage you in that.
Yeah, you'd be surprised, you know. But the point being, you have to have a real fantastic story too, and a good literary, you know, person to help push that. Okay. So I kind of took that. My motivation, I believe, was that I had. To be able to talk about it was not easy at all. I would mention it to people, but I would cringe because I was still in pain. And years later, and things that were, I realized that before I knew, but as I began to connect what PTSD was. You see, I said, oh, you know, and then I began to connect anxiety. And still have to keep myself in check because I still pick up on little paranoia. But I go back to what I do as a pastoral counselor. See, the whole idea of pastoral counseling, that you can recognize things what people say, and then you give them the tools and the scriptures to work through that. Because that's an alternative for people who are in the church. They didn't want to go to another type of counselor. It was taboo.
Right.
You didn't go outside the church, and you definitely didn't go to this humanistic thinking.
Right.
You see, yeah, that was the curse.
Right. Okay. Okay. Okay.
So to talk, there was no one to talk to. Growing up, there was no one I could tell. I told my mother at 42 years old what happened to me regarding my stepfather.
Yeah.
And that's when and then I began to tell my sister and my brother. And I began to, people called me to speak. When I wrote my book, they had me to come speak, you know. And so the more you talk about it, the more you disclose these things, the more memories come, the more you find yourself in the process, because healing is an ongoing process.
Right.
And
journey.
Yes, it's a journey.
Exactly.
And then on top of that, the more you begin to develop, or let's say you go from survivor to thriver. You find yourself helping someone else, you know, letting them know it's okay because I've been there. So, you know, you can talk to me. So that was it. And so now that's how I had to get it out. That's where my book came from. I never could write. It was me going through those things. Even with the ones who are the daughters of Zelophehad. They wanted a piece of the mountain, and you know, they wanted a piece of the land, and they couldn't get it, you know, because it only went to the boys. And they said, "Hey, we didn't do nothing wrong. It's not our fault. Our father had girls, you know." And told that to Moses, and Moses went back and asked God. He said, "What am I gonna do?" He said, "They right, you know, give it to them. They just can't marry out of their line. You know, if they were from Judah or whatever tribe they were from, they had to stay within their tribe, so that property could run through that tribe." And so when I went to buy a house 11 years ago, I ran into some things when it came to credit, the double standard, and I was a single woman, you know, trying to do this and that, and I saw the differences. Even in this day and time, there's still some issues, and so that had to go in there because that was discrimination.
Exactly.
You see, that was my battle with discrimination.
Yeah, as you were talking about
good information.
Continuing discrimination, Dee Dee, I wanted you to just talk a little bit about some of the issues that you've seen, particularly as it's relating to women and children, because those issues that Reverend Gardner just talked about, I've seen in my practice, and I'm sure that you have, of the kind of not only discrimination, but the sense of being in an oppressive environment, you know, often for women in this 21st century, and also for the children then that they're raising. So I wanted to ask you, What do you see a lot of that in your practice, or do you feel that it is something that that sense of discrimination, is that decreasing, increasing, remaining the same?
It's a good question. For me in my practice, I see it about the same. Like you said earlier, that there are some problems that aren't anything new. How they play out now is different in this age than it even was 10 years ago. Through insurance discrimination, I see a lot of issues with the insurance policies and things that get written. I see a lot of financial discrimination, or discrimination that is based on someone's financial ability and capability there. I see a lot of people doing a lot of work to empower women, and I still believe that it's needed and necessary to continue to empower women. I just went on a trip to Honduras, and a lot of the work that is being done in Honduras is to empower women and children to break cycles of poverty down there. And I also see a great need still to strengthen men of all races to be providers and fathers, and in the best sense of the word, to where they are providing and protecting those that they love, and to take that and to provide respect for both themselves and their partners, and for the children that they father and raise, hopefully. You know, it's a very powerful thing. I see it as being the same as it has always been.
That challenge is still...
Yes, the challenge is still very much prevalent. It looks a little bit different than I remember it being told to me as a child. I remember my father being very disheartened in the late 1970s when my brother married an African-American woman, and my great-uncle disowned our side of the family.
Oh my.
And
just on the whole side of the family?
Our whole family.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I don't
you know, our whole section, you know, my father and all of his children. And all of his children. And I realize what a big step that was for my father to stand up to his uncle, and to tell my great uncle that he was wrong. You know, that was not that long ago.
Right, yeah.
1977, you know, it was not that long ago. But that kind of discrimination, while it's not talked about in the press quite as much, still happens, especially in families.
Right.
But it also happens, you know, you're just a girl.
Yeah.
You know, and that is damaging to us as people.
Absolutely.
It's damaging to the men,
Yeah.
as well as to the women,
Oh, yes.
and as well as to our children. You know.
One of the things I wanted to ask, as you talk about that, and I totally agree with your assessment of the damage that it causes. In African American families, particularly, but also in other families, we're seeing the gap between what were two-parent families now. With our African American population, I ran across the statistics some time ago that the majority of our young people now are born into single-parent families. And again, in the general population, that fracturing of the family is something that is happening, more and more. Dee, I want to ask, when you see in your family work the kind of family fractures, again, do you feel that's happening more, less?
I think that single parent families are more the norm. That is definitely what I see in my office. I have so much admiration for these single parent families, whether it's, I had a Haitian man in my office a couple of years ago raising his 2 children here in Orlando, and to me that man is a saint. I could not believe the work that he was doing. His daughter was afraid to tell him something, to tell him what she truly felt and thought, and so she drew a picture about it, and she gave it to me to keep. She was getting ready to leave, and he was checking out and scheduling his next appointment, and she tapped me on the shoulder and asked if she could share it with her father. And so I took them back to my office so that she could share the picture with her dad. And she was so afraid to tell him what she had put on the picture, and she showed him the picture, and he just opened up his arms. This Haitian man that could barely speak English to me, he just opened up his arms and took her on his lap, this tall, gangly 9-year-old girl, and just hugged her and told her how proud he was of her and how much he loved her. I was sitting there crying, in my office, because that I could not have scripted his response better than what that man, as a single father, chose to do in that moment for his daughter. It was very powerful. And so single parents do that kind of work. And they do it every day. But sometimes, not just single parents in this country, but single parents around the world are working so hard to put food in the mouths of their children that they don't think about, I need to touch this child also. I need to give this child love and affection and emotional support as well, because they're coming home from working 2 and 3 jobs exhausted.
That's like the copay issue, again, taking that $50, going to the grocery store there, and they're so busy living for no other reason but survival mode. Constantly
to be able to pay their
survival mode.
copays to the doctor for insurance. That's very disheartening.
So
Very
that's an issue.
It's interesting that both of you are raising the issue of the financial part of it and copays. One of the things that Reverend Gail, that you shared with me is, as we were talking about mental health, is the situation in our state of Florida now of mental health. I remember looking at some statistics indicating that in our great state of Florida, that we are at the bottom of the expenditures, in the United States on mental health care.
That's right.
And currently, while we were just talking about the needs being there and in many ways increasing, where individuals are trying to get into counseling or therapy, that services and service availability is actually lessening.
Right.
One of the articles you brought to my attention was the current debate in our Florida legislature about the budget, wherein if the legislature doesn't act to accepting, I think it is $1 billion from the federal government to to continue funding for the LIT program. the lower income program, that it will severely impact services at hospitals that treat the poor, clinic services, physician services, etc. So in many ways, on one side of our mouth, in this great state, we talk about the need for responsibility, the need for motivation, the need for independence, etc. But at the same time, even those individuals who want to get the services now potentially may be cut off.
Right.
One of the things, and the lower income program are for those working poor.
Working poor.
And in the wisdom of our great governor and legislature, we have refused to accept $50 billion in funding, which would have funded the poor,
Medicaid expansion.
In Medicaid expansion, exactly. So, in many ways, we talk the talk, but in actually walking the walk, as in funding mental health care, we still, are lagging, or really living, to me, in a fool's paradise.
Right.
So, and one of the things that we've tried to do on the Journey 2020 are raise issues, not just of how individuals are affected by, their own psyches or the circumstances in which they find themselves, but also by the social and political environment that they're in. And that environment does not lend itself to being able to enable people to climb out of poverty, to maintain, Dee Dee, just as you talked about, parents working 2 and 3 jobs, then coming home. Wouldn't it be wonderful if that parent had, on occasion, a support therapist or support counselor to be able to sit down and say, listen, I'm really stressed. I just need someone to talk to.
And what we do as therapists quite frequently is usually within the first session, sometimes it's the second session with a client. At Everyone's Counseling Center, we create a treatment plan with our clients. And one of the things that I do, especially with the couples I work with, is as we identify that treatment plan, I also identify, okay, this treatment plan is a piece of paper. It is not written in stone. You can take this plan and you can choose to work this plan by meeting with me every week. You could work this plan by doing a little something yourself on it every single day. It's going to go faster that way. Take some ownership over this plan. But also, sometimes what they need to do with that plan is go and find one of their other support people in their life. Whether it's a pastoral counselor, a pastor, a good friend, a cousin, a coworker, somebody that is like a coach to them. There's a life coach profession now, but someone that they don't have to pay a $55 copay to, or something along those lines that they can do. And take that with them. That is what employee assistance plan counseling is designed to do. If the company that this person works for offers employee assistance plan counseling. Most EAPs offer between 3 and 8 sessions for each member of the family that is in the household that the employee lives with.
That's really.
So
I'm
that
sorry, go
most
ahead.
EAPs do that, and at Everyone's Counseling Center, we're able to file most health insurance plans, not all of them, and most EAP plans, and so that is helpful. but it doesn't answer everything about the financial picture at all.
Because I was about to say that, and the information that you shared, Didi, is really important, because many individuals don't even realize that there's an EAP plan, an employee assistance plan at their job. The unfortunate thing is that many of minority workers are in companies and in jobs where there is no EAP.
No benefits.
No benefits, or very minimal benefits. And so we are stuck often in wanting to continue counseling or therapy with them, but also realizing that we may not be able to because of those financial restrictions. And I think that's one of the toughest...
We live in the real world.
Things to deal with.
Yeah, we live in the real world.
I think that some of the work that Reverend Gill is doing in terms of that connection between the church or the faith community and the counseling, I think is really important.
I agree.
I've had several people come into my office, and they're surprised when they say, "Well, you psychologists, you don't believe in faith or anything like that." And I have to say to them, I said, "Well, look over to the right-hand side of my bookshelf, and what do you see there?" And there's a Bible, that's there. Maybe I'm getting into your territory, but there have been times when we have opened the book. Okay.
Because that's what
it's
they
not
can
just
relate
collecting
to.
dust.
Exactly.
That's what they can relate to.
Exactly.
And can I say, and I made the statement about the copay, because when I send them on, I have to first make sure that they can go to the next person. If they can't, we try to find some avenues or some way to underwrite the 2 or 3 of those first visits in order to do. That's our plan. And coming to me, there is no charge, because my focus is regarding, which is what we do on the social justice level, is to the grassroots level, but under the umbrella of Woman to Woman, is with Rafa Soul Care, is to get people to understand that it's okay to go see a counselor, to dispel the myths and all of those things that would hinder them from going, and the distrust, so that they will feel comfortable about going if they need to go to a licensed therapist. So I don't charge. We use donations and private funding to do that, not even government funding, in order to get that done. But I don't want to politicize when you're talking about the funding for Medicaid. You understand that we are in a red state, and so the whole idea is that we make sure that those things that need to be funded to keep the state going, and with the tourism and all of those things it has never been important to deal with the bottom level, the poor. It was always, you remember, it was a time, I remember my grandmother, my mother, and my cousins, when they moved to the north, they worked for people who were snowbirds. They had companies and big businesses up north. In the wintertime, they headed for Florida. So Florida was, on that level, was becoming a very rich place, especially when Disney came in town. So when I say all that to say that, looking at the poor on that end, the Bible says the poor will always be with us, but that doesn't mean we can't take care of them while they're with us. We're supposed to take care of them. And that's where, even we look for the government to do some things, but then I'm back to the church doing some things. See, so if we don't have what we need here, then let's take the therapists that are sitting in our congregations, bring them together, start support groups in our churches. That's what we try to do. And let's try to bring those therapists together, and even the ones in our communities, because in the state of Florida, just African American therapists and and professionally licensed mental health counselors is only 1%.
Right.
That's
very
unreal.
small.
You know,
Yeah,
so how
exactly.
many people do I have to send people to?
Right.
That then the Hispanic community is almost nil. And we do have social workers that are trained, and but right, that's a whole nother ball game. So being able to, we don't have the funds now. And we want the funds. We want the government to accept the funds. But everything tends to come back to the church. And where are we going to handle this? And tell our people it's all right to go to a counselor.
Right.
Matter of fact, let's get somebody in here. Let's see how many we got sitting out there that are social workers and therapists and whoever, and let's start putting together. And I'm working with a gentleman, a pastor in South Florida, J.R. Thicklin, who has been doing that with the University of Minnesota Institute for Domestic Violence in the African American community.
Okay, yeah.
And so that's the plan. That what I've been thinking they're doing, and so we hooked up, and so we're looking to do that so that churches can start, putting those communities. We have it. First Baptist has a counseling center.
Counseling center, absolutely.
New Covenant has a counseling, gentleman over there, Mr. Wilson.
Right.
We got it's in the place.
Right.
So we're waiting. We want the money for them because we can't take care of everybody. Or take what you can and share it with us so that we can meet more of those needs, since you're not going to do it in that way.
Well, Rev, you were talking about perhaps not politicizing, but one of the stances that I've taken is that Jesus was political.
Oh yeah, he was.
Okay, so we need not to shy away.
Yeah. Oh well. See, I'm not on my soapbox. I'm on somebody else's show. But now I got a minute.
That's all right.
Okay. Give me a minute.
One thing that
He's taking that minute.
Yeah. And I can work this.
Okay. We unfortunately we're gonna have to draw our discussion to a close. And this
we'll
time is
continue
going.
talking off camera.
Yeah.
As going so well. Actually, what we can also do is invite you to come back. So we can extend the conversation.
Okay.
And what I'd like to do in closing is to just ask each of you if you had one thing that you would want our audience, or particularly I think our young people, to know about mental health and what you do. I'd like you to go ahead and share that, if you will. Okay.
As I said, my concern is how many people out there who have been sexually abused or suffering domestic violence have not had the support group that they needed, the support around them as families and churches, and you couldn't talk about these things back in the day. So we have a generation that is in my age group who have been walking around and living in trauma, which it affects their relationships and the economy. It affects the community.
Absolutely.
It affects everything like that. Then they pass it on to their children. So that's important. Now we have a generation that'll tell just about anything. But
and put it on
And
Facebook.
share it.
Yeah, put it on Facebook.
Share it on Instagram.
And we want to show them how to channel that, and maybe send some of them to college so they can become therapists and whatever, and pastors and whoever else, and to work with people. But I believe mental health is real. I read a book called Jesus, the village psychiatrist. And he and what we didn't have a label for Mary that has 7 demons, but they didn't have one, but we have one, and we can call her bipolar or has 7 personalities. You know what I'm saying? Because we're finite. That's the way our thinking is.
Yes.
We have to have something. So I believe that it is real, but I believe that I need to give people an alternative rather than them just sit and die in that for the rest of their life.
Very good. Okay. Dee?
I think that all of my work can be summarized just very simply that mental health is about how we make decisions. And we make decisions, it would be my hope that we make decisions based out of love and not fear. And trauma creates that fear base. And so how do we take trauma and the hurts and the wounds from our lives, from all areas of our lives, and choose love instead of fear, and choose to live our life and choose to make our decisions based out of love.
Okay.
That's very powerful.
Very well said.
Thank you.
I want to thank the both of you being here with us tonight, and I do mean that we are going to continue this discussion both on off camera and hopefully in another segment of the Journey 2020. Before we end, though, Monday is our official recognition of Memorial Day, and to all those who have served our country, who have had relatives, fathers, mothers, uncles, brothers, children who are in the military, or those who have passed on, I would like to salute their service and to honor the memory of them, on this Memorial Day. With that, we have to draw our broadcast to a close. And as we like to say here at the Journey 2020, the journey is from me to you and from you to me, so that we can reach a higher level. Good night. Have a wonderful Memorial Day, and we'll be back here next week. Take care.